So I know some people are still having trouble getting the textbook, right?
I have about 6
Have
more
more
days.
days.
I have about 6 more days.
They do have more at the bookstore now?
I got an email saying that mine was the ones that I ordered online. So I don't
Okay, so if you order it, it's there. Okay, good. If you don't have it yet, again, let me know. And, because special circumstances, I will try to get you a PDF of the chapter, right?
Are they open on Saturdays?
I have no idea, but I don't think so because that would be convenient.
And I can't get mine until Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
Because they won't come in.
Yeah. So again, like if you won't have a copy by say tomorrow, let me know, and I will make sure that you get a PDF of the chapter. Just to cover all possible bases, right?
Assignment 3 is potentially going to be our second assignment, right?
That is going to be your second assignment, yeah. So as I was explaining to the people who were here early, in general, I only want you to do one assignment at the end of each chapter, right? So for chapter 1, I only wanted you to do assignment 1 on page 36, right? You didn't have to do the other 2 that followed it. And for this one, I only want you to do assignment 3. So in general, we're only going to be doing the assignments that kind of track closest with what we're doing in class. So what this assignment is going to be about is uncovering the assumptions that are underlying a particular piece of writing, right? Like what sorts of things, like what sorts of implied beliefs are contained within this piece of writing, right? So does anybody have any other questions about the assignment before we proceed?
I don't recall it being a syllabus. I might have just glanced over it when I was looking last night, but how much does each of those represent towards our grade?
I think that the homework assignments are about 10% of the grade total. So each is worth about 2 points. And like I said on the first day, right, as long as you turn something in and don't cheat, you will get some credit for it, right? You will get some points. The only ways to fail this class really are to either cheat or to not turn things in. Right? As long as you're doing the work, you will get at least a 70. Right? Unless the work that you're doing is really, really not up to par, right? Which has never been the case, right? So it's not going to be the case here either. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so let's start today by thinking about language. So I want you to read the sentence that I've written up here on the board, which is a quote from the American philosopher and poet Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I want you to try to think about what this means, right? What does this actually mean? Yes?
What's the word?
Which word?
Foolish.
A foolish consistency
Is the what?
is the hobgoblin of little minds.
What does that even mean?
Well, that's what I'm asking you, right? Oh, a hobgoblin? Does anybody know what a hobgoblin is?
I know it from Spiderweb Chronicles.
Okay. So what is a hobgoblin in Spiderweb Chronicles?
It's like, I can like describe what it looks like. It was like a little creature that kind of looked somewhat like a pig with like a different type of animal's body.
Uh-huh.
That was like special in itself, but it was also killed off.
Okay, so in folklore, which is what the Spiderweb Chronicles are drawing on, right? A hobgoblin is a kind of small, malicious spirit, right? Now, usually malicious more in the sense of like mischievous, right? Like it'll tie your shoelaces together, it'll sour the milk, right? It'll do things that are not necessarily dangerous, but that are annoying.
And then
right?
it gets into something it gets into something like one time.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what a hobgoblin is.
It depends on what your definition of consistency is.
Okay.
Whether you mean is consistency like what your brain is made of, or how you act.
Okay, so yeah, so like consistency can be something like content and texture, right? So like the consistency of this, like the consistency of this pudding, right, is too watery or something like that, right? But it can, yeah, consistency can also refer to the way we behave. So given the context here, which definition do you think is more likely? Yeah, Brandon.
Behavioral.
Okay, yeah, the behavioral definition, yeah, is more likely given the context here, right? Yeah, Brandon.
I think is it saying like having a foolish mindset or like behavior is like an annoyance or downside to small minds or like a small mindset or closed mindset?
Okay, yeah, I think we're thinking along the right lines here, right? I think around the right lines, not minds. I'm tripping up on my own words here. So what suggested to you closed-mindedness, Brandon?
They call them little minds.
Okay, yeah. Little minds. You're interpreting here as closed or narrow, right? And what other words in the sentence are leading you to interpret little minds as closed or narrow minds?
He kind of downplayed him by saying foolish. And
Okay.
using like negative terms.
Yeah, so the use of a word like foolish and the comparison to a creature like a hobgoblin, right? Yeah, that leads us to define little minds, like not as minds that are literally small, right? But minds that are closed off and narrow. Good. So see, yeah, this is exactly what we do, right? When we're confronted with something that's a little difficult to read, right? We use context clues to help us figure out the words that are ambiguous and the words that we don't know, right? Good. So a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. Right? So what's meant here by consistency? I think you're right that it's related to behavior, right? When we talk about consistency in terms of behavior, what do we mean? If your behavior is consistent.
Habits.
Okay, we're talking about habits, right? Habits are a consistent behavior, right? We're talking about a person whose behavior or beliefs are consistent. What does that mean?
Like a consistent mindset.
Yeah. So what does it mean to have a consistent mindset?
Like you think the same, have the same views on stuff.
You don't open your mind up.
Is it kind of like being hard-headed?
Yeah, so I think in this context, right, it's something that's hard-headed. Yeah, hard-headed would be a good synonym, right? Someone who has a foolish consistency, right? Someone who is behaving stubbornly, right? So yeah, someone who is consistent is someone who doesn't change their views or their beliefs, right? Okay, so if a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, then how do we put all this together, right? How do we put all of everything that we've pulled out here together?
Being unwilling to change your views and beliefs is the trait of a small, close-minded person.
Yeah, essentially, if we had to boil down the meaning of the sentence, right, that is kind of what we get here, right? Now, does it seem to be saying that consistency is by itself bad? Now, what kind of consistency is it calling out here?
Foolish.
Yeah. So it's just talking about consistency, like when you cling to a belief when you have no evidence for that belief, or when in light of other new information, right? So let's take a minute and see what else we can pull out of individual words here, right? So each word in any language has two basic kinds of definition, right? There's the denotation and the connotation. Usually connotations, plural. So denotation is the literal meaning of a word, right? Just the dictionary definition, right? If you look it up on dictionary.com, this is what it's going to tell you. So consistency, for example, is, an unchanging mindset, right? That would be the denotation of that. Connotations are the range of associations suggested by the word. So this is one reason why two words that have the same denotation still don't necessarily mean exactly the same thing, right? To give you an example, tell me if all three of the words that I put on the board here mean the same thing or have the same denotation. Do these words all refer to the same thing?
Yes.
But do they mean the same thing? Yeah. Are they interchangeable with each other?
No.
Are they?
In certain senses.
In certain circumstances, maybe, right? But the social situations in which I would use these particular words differ a great deal, right? And many of these words carry connotations that others do not, right? So, for example, what kind of connotations does the word shit carry? Okay, potential anger, right? It's like, if I walk up to this table and I stub my toe on it, right? Am I going to shout, "Oh, bowel movement"? Right? No, because we don't use that phrase to express anger, right? Now, we do sometimes, say, "Oh shit," when we screw up, right? What other connotations does this particular word have that the others don't?
Aggressive.
Potentially aggressive, right?
Maybe, fear. Maybe you get scared.
Yeah, yeah. So that there's an emotional resonance this word has that the others don't, right? Anger and fear. But also, like, what's one of the reasons we don't use this word in the same kinds of situations we use the other two?
It's not as formal.
Yeah, it's considered vulgar, right? It's considered a rude word, right? So, a doctor isn't going to say, "Oh, I'm going to have the patient take a shit, and then I'm going to, examine it," right? No, they would say, the patient, defecated or had a bowel movement, and this was blah blah blah, right? We can't use this in like a clinical sense, right? And we also can't use it in certain company because people sometimes get offended, right? To give you another example, red and crimson. What's crimson? Yeah, it's a shade of red, right? It's a color, it's a shade of red. So it's more specific than sort of saying just generally red, right? But crimson also carries particular connotations referring to blood and violence, right? It's, blood is sometimes, poetically referred to as, the crimson flood and things like that, right? So we have associations with one of these words that the synonym doesn't carry, right? Right, grill or hibachi, right? A hibachi is just a small Japanese charcoal grill. So on the one hand, it is referring to something more specific, but it is also referring to something that has a particular cultural context, right? So you can't use these two things interchangeably. Now let's think about some of the connotations that we attach to the words in this sentence, right? Let's start with foolish. What does it mean to be foolish? What's the literal meaning of the word foolish? What would be a good literal synonym for it?
I want to say stupid, but I don't feel like that's a
Silly.
good one.
Okay, yeah, stupid is close, right? But it doesn't quite make the mark, right? Now, why is stupid, the silly I think is a good one, right? Why is silly closer to the meaning of foolish than stupid?
Because stupid could have other meanings.
Yeah, and stupid generally refers to a condition we regard as not correctable, right? A kind of natural capacity or lack thereof. Whereas silly is maybe closer to a kind of temporary derangement, right? Something that's fixable. What other connotations does the word foolish carry? What associations do we have with this word? If someone or something is foolish, what does the word foolish conjure up for us?
A lot of times when I think foolish, a fair amount of time has to do with like immaturity.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, silliness, immaturity, things like that, right? Now let's move on to hobgoblin, right? So we've got our basic definition of hobgoblin here, right? But what else is important about a hobgoblin in terms of the meaning of this sentence? So it's a small, malicious, annoying spirit or fairy. What else is it? I'll give you a little hint. Are hobgoblins real?
Fictional.
Yeah, hobgoblins are imaginary, right? Right? It's a thing that doesn't really exist except in the imagination. So when we add that connotation to the sentence here, right? What does this add to our reading of it? About about a foolish consistency being the thing that trips you up, that ties your shoelaces together.
Tells you you're talking about
Yeah, it's something that's all in your head, right? It's something that's all in your own mind. It's not real. Right? A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. It's the product of your own imagination. Now, do we notice a strand running through the language and associations we have? Right? So remember, strands are these patterns of repetition and similarity, right? Do we notice a strand here? Words or ideas that seem to relate to each other?
Foolish and little.
Okay, foolish, little. Why foolish, James?
they're both descriptive.
Okay, they're both descriptive, right? And there's another good reason, I think, to associate foolish and little with each other, right? What's one of the words that we have said foolish conjures up for us? One of the ideas foolish conjures up for us? Yeah, immaturity, right? So we associate both little and foolish, right? With being, immature, with being, like half grown, right? Is there anything else we can fit into this? Yeah, Brandon.
They both give a very negative connotation.
Okay, yeah, they're both negative.
I guess you could put Hobgoblin in there.
Yeah, why could you put Hobgoblin in there?
Not fully grown people would be more willing to believe in a Hobgoblin.
Sure, yeah, because it's an imaginary thing. Right? It's 1258, by the way, Asia. Because it's not a fully grown thing, right? It's something a child is more likely to believe in, right? Okay, so yeah, good. So the Hobgoblin can refer to childish belief, right? Good. That's actually better than where I was going with this. And how else does a Hobgoblin maybe relate to things like foolish and little? If we're thinking about the thing itself. Not just that it's imaginary or more likely to be believed in by children. It's also small, yes. It's just a little thing, right? So we have this kind of the strand of words that refer to smallness. And to childishness, right? Something that's not directly referenced in the sentence itself, right? But something that our reading of the sentence now strongly suggests if we get in there and pick apart the language. So what I'd like us to do now, right? I want us to take a quick look at the lyrics to an old country song by John Prine. And I want you to do the same thing with the language of the song, right? So before we leap to any other kinds of conclusions or impressions or arguments, I want you to just examine the lyrics of the song itself and try to pick out the range of connotations you see in individual words, right? And then we'll try to see how things fit together and how we might link them up into an interpretation. All right, so go ahead, get started. And I don't need these back, so you can write on them. In general, anything that I give you, I don't want back.
When you want us to find connotations, because I know with strands it's all words that are in it, but if there's, would we choose a word that's in there but it's not using another meaning that it has? That's confusing, I know. But.
Okay, so are you also are you asking about words that are also ambiguous that can mean more than one thing?
I guess.
Okay, so yeah, that actually would be something you'd want to point out. If a word in there has more than one possible meaning, then yeah, absolutely point that out. And in general, yeah, with what we're talking about with connotations, right, are just these ideas we associate with particular words, right? Not so much the definition of the word itself, right? All right, and just to give you some sense of the song, I'm going to play it for you while you
Digesting, Reader's Digest, in the back of a dirty bookstore. A plastic flag with gum on the back fell out on the floor. Well, I picked it up and I ran outside, slapped it on my window shield. And if I could see old Betsy Ross, I'd tell her how good I feel. But your flag decal won't get you into heaven anymore. They're already overcrowded from your dirty little war. Now Jesus don't like killing, no matter morning, and the cashier said to me, if you join the Christmas club, we'll give you 10 of them flags for free. Well, I didn't mess around a bit. I took him up on what he said, and I stuck them stickers all over my car and one on my wife's forehead. But your flag decal won't get you into heaven anymore. They're already overcrowded from your dirty little war. Now Jesus don't like killing, no matter what the reason's for. And your flag decal won't get you into heaven anymore. Well, I got my windshields filled with flags I couldn't see, so I ran the car upside a curve right into a tree. By the time they got a doctor down, I was already dead, and I'll never understand why the man standing in the pearly gate said, but your flag decal won't get you into heaven anymore. We're already overcrowded from your dirty little war.
Take another 2 minutes with it. I see you guys marking up the sheets. That's good. All right, always mark up what you're reading. Just see what you can pull out of this. Okay, so what have you guys been able to pull out of this? What have you got? Yeah, Brandon.
I put them down just using dirty and little with similar connotations to describe the word.
Okay. Dirty and little. Okay, so how so? Like, what do you think he means here by dirty in this context? When he talks about the dirty war.
Like a lot of killing.
Okay, yeah, like just the simple carnage, right?
Yeah, like.
Okay, like bodies building up and all that sort of thing. What else might he mean by dirty?
Morally corrupt.
Okay, yeah, he might also be thinking of it as morally corrupt, right? That it's not being fought for good motives. And how might this relate to little? What do you think? So what that he refers to the war as little? What is he doing to it?
It's not significant.
Yeah, it's not important, right? Whatever it's being fought over is not significant enough to justify, right? Now, this is also one of those places where knowing a little bit of context can help us. What war do you think he's talking about?
Vietnam,
Okay, how do you know, James?
1971.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, he's referring to the Vietnam War here. All right, good. So is this the only place in the song where we see the word dirty, just in the chorus when he's talking about?
No, he's talking
About the store in the first verse.
Yeah, in the very first line we talk about the dirty bookstore, right? What do we think that means? While digesting Reader's Digest in the back of a dirty bookstore.
Well, the fact that in the second line it had the plastic flag with the gum on the back fall on the floor, it might mean that it's like, I took it as rundown.
Okay, yeah, it can mean run down, unclean, right? Although, just to be clear too, the gum, he's talking, it's spirit gum. There's like a little bit of rubber cement on the back of it so you can stick it on that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so it could be run down, right? Dirty in terms of unclean.
So I use that kind of stuff on posters.
What's that?
I use
Okay.
kind of the sticky
Mhm.
tack on my posters.
Does anybody else have another sense, like another connotation of dirty that might be applicable here? Like what kind of store this is?
Pornographic.
Yeah. That's the other thing that's suggested here, right? This guy is sitting in the back of a porn shop reading Reader's Digest, and this flag falls out, right? Yes, this is an adult bookstore. So yeah, it is probably none too clean, but it is also a place where people go to satisfy their more prurient interests, right? Okay, what else did you guys pull out of this? Yeah, Chris.
When you said he's digesting Reader's Digest,
Uh-huh.
like you can actually digest a magazine. So
No, you cannot.
Just like reading everything on it, taking it all into this.
Yeah. So digesting, you usually like think of that in terms of like eating or consuming something, right? Yeah, good. And if he's just sitting there consuming that Reader's Digest, is it likely that he's thinking too hard about what he's reading? Or is it just kind of going in one end and out the other? Yeah, think about, like, I think the literal process of digestion, I think, is relevant here to the meaning that he intends to convey here, right? Now, Reader's Digest is already, to some extent, digested. Do any of you even know what Reader's Digest is? Yeah, it's a magazine, right? And it's something like, have any of you ever even seen a copy of this magazine? Okay, yeah. Like I remember my grandparents always used to have it, right? It's about yay big, and it can conveniently sit next to the toilet, right? And it's frequent bathroom reading for older people. But what Reader's Digest does is they take books and longer articles from other magazines and they condense them, right? Right. Essentially, they cut a lot out of them to make them short enough to fit into a magazine format, right? So you're already getting, when you read Reader's Digest, a kind of simplified, uncomplicated version of a longer piece of reading, right, or a longer piece of writing. It's already digested for you. Someone else has already done the thinking. The readership of Reader's Digest also has traditionally leaned older and conservative. So it's a magazine that is often associated with a particular age group and a particular politics as well, right? Okay, so that's a lot to pull out of one line here, right? But I think that this is, I think that we're getting somewhere with all this. Like, is there anything else that seems relevant in this first verse? Yeah, Brandon.
I put that when he uses flag decal, it has kind of a double meaning for like American flag.
Okay.
I put being patriotic.
Okay, yeah, we tend to associate the flag, with patriotism, right? I mean, literally, a flag is a symbol that is intended to represent a particular country, right? And displaying a flag is typically, displaying support for one's country, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so that it's a flag decal. And it's just these little flag stickers that he's collecting rather than actual flags.
It's got to be something to do with the war.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, in the chorus right after, they're saying that it's saying the dirty little war and Jesus doesn't like killing you and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
So, and the way, I'd interpret it as like, he was saying the patriotism wasn't going to get them into heaven anymore because of how often we were going to war and killing and that stuff, and then they weren't necessarily like acting in their faith as more as just
Okay, yeah.
country kind of thing.
So yeah, the song seems to be associating at least a certain kind of patriotism with war making, right? With support for war, right? Okay, good. But I think what I'm trying to get at here too is the nature of the decal here, right? He's not walking up and down the street waving a flag, right? He's collecting little stickers of flags. Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
Shows that he like doesn't really support it, or he has like little support, not full supporting it.
Yeah, go ahead. What were you gonna say, James?
Maybe it's what's that word? Like he's showing it, like he's talking the talk but not walking the walk. You know.
Okay. That he's not really.
It's performative.
It's performative. He's not showing any kind of like values
Or
attached.
It's just not as important as a.
Yeah, and I think the decal kind of the fact it's a decal kind of minimizes the importance of the symbol, right? It's not the flag itself; it's a cheap little copy.
Does that say support for war?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, these are small, cheap copies of flags. Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
So is it like kind of like mimicking or like sarcasm?
Oh, I think absolutely. Yeah, I think that the song is kind of making fun of the guy who is the speaker's voice here, right? Because I mean, like if we look at what happens to him in the final verse, right? What is the end result of this guy's collection of flag decals?
He died.
Yeah, he dies, right? And I think why he dies, how he dies, is actually really important here, right? Why does he die?
Because they blew up his
Because
windshield.
the flags are in his way, like symbolizing kind of like the country.
Yeah, he's got so many damn flags on his windshield, right? Yeah.
Patriotism that it makes him die. Talking about probably about back to the war, about people's the patriotism is like so strong they can't see that they're literally just going to just like God.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's kind of literally in the song blinded by these the symbols of like mass-produced patriotism, right? Yeah, good. And I do want to say, by the way, like, I'm not trying to push any particular political viewpoint here, right? I'm not asking you to adopt John Prine's viewpoint. I'm not even suggesting that John Prine's viewpoint is my own viewpoint. The reason we use this song is because it actually lends itself really well to this kind of symbolic analysis, right? And also because of certain issues here with genre, right? If we think about this as a country song, right?
Oh yeah, they all like patriotic and stuff.
Yeah, we tend to associate country music, broadly speaking, with what kind of politics? Yeah, we tend to think of country music as being highly conservative, right? Where it's clearly political at all. But this does not seem like a conservative argument, right? So it's kind of pushing against the usual confine, the usual ideology in the genre, right? And if you look at the album cover here too, like it looks like a country album. It's a white dude sitting on a couple of bales of hay with an acoustic guitar next to him, right? So there's nothing in the packaging that suggests any kind of variation from the normal politics of country music. But here we've got an anti-Vietnam War protest song, right, on a country album. So that in and of itself is a little bit weird if we think about context, right? Now, a couple other things I want to note here, and then I want to move on. I want to get to the kind of assumptions underlying the song here about war and about patriotism. Does the song seem to regard patriotism itself as a bad thing? When does it seem to think patriotism is bad? Or when does it seem to think patriotism is good? Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
It like blocks your moral view of like killing or murder.
Okay, yeah, when your country is doing something you see as wrong, and it blocks, it gets in the way of your moral sense, then yeah, he seems to regard that as a bad sort of patriotism, right? And how can we tell that he doesn't always think patriotism is wrong? If we, yeah, go ahead.
And he keeps trying to get more and more stickers.
Well, the guy in the psalm keeps trying to get more and more stickers, right? But think about what St. Peter says to him in the chorus. What's that first line say?
Flag decal won't get you in heaven.
Anymore. Yeah. So this seems to be a recent development, right? Your flag decal won't get you into heaven anymore. We're already overcrowded from your dirty little war, right? So he seems to be regarding this coupling of support for war and blind patriotism as a new thing, right? Now, in terms of attitudes towards war, does the song seem to think war is ever justified from a Christian moral perspective? How can we tell that?
Jesus don't like killing no matter what the reasons for.
Yeah, Jesus don't like killing no matter what the reasons for, right? So the viewpoint here seems to be that there is no such thing, again, from a Christian moral perspective, as a just war, right? That it's always wrong, it's always unjust. So those are two things that we can regard as kind of basic assumptions here, right? That, but things like this decal in a mass-produced magazine, right? That cheap, mass-produced ideas spoil loftier moral notions, right? The easy accumulation of flags is, not the same thing as, a moral vision for a country, right? And that war is antithetical to Christian morality. And these are things that you're going to want to look for in everything you read, right? Everything that you read is going to have certain unstated assumptions underlying it, right? Things that are kind of so basic to the author's thought process, to the author's ideas, that they're not going to feel the need to state them, right? They may not even realize that this is something that's underlying the work.
What does that say? War is what to Christian morality?
Antithetical. Antithetical. Right, and if something is antithetical, does everybody know what antithetical means? Okay, so antithetical means like opposed in every possible ideological way, right? That it is the complete ideological opposite. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is show you guys a brief video clip. It's of an old comedy sketch. It's old and it's British. I find it funny, you may not. If you don't, too bad, I'm amusing myself. And what I want you to think about here, right, is the relationship between the two characters, right? What is the role, the social role played by each character in the scene? And what assumptions do we tend to have about this kind of interaction? Right? If this was us in one of these positions, what would we expect to happen, right? Okay, so let's just get this set up. No, come back. can never get this projector screen to do what I want it to.
Have you had it yet where it flew up halfway through a lecture?
No. I think most of my battles with it occur before I have to turn the projector on.
Mine happened during a presentation last year.
That is less than ideal.
Hello, I wish to register a complaint. Hello, miss. What do you mean, miss? Oh, I'm sorry, I have a cold. I wish to make a complaint.
Oh, sorry, we're closing for lunch.
Never mind that, my lad. I wish to complain about this parrot. What I purchased not half an hour ago from this very boutique.
Oh, yes, the Norwegian blue. What's wrong with it?
I'll tell you what's wrong with it, my lad. It's dead. That's what's wrong with it.
No, it's resting, look.
Look, my lad, I know a dead parrot when I see one, and I'm looking at one right now.
No, that's not dead, it's resting.
Resting?
Yeah, resting. Remarkable bird, the Norwegian blue, isn't it? Beautiful plumage.
The plumage don't enter into it. It's still dead.
No, it's resting.
All right then, if it's resting, I'll wake it up. Hello, Polly! I've got a nice fresh cuttlefish for you if you wake up, Mr. Polly Parrot!
There he moved.
No, you didn't. That was you pushing the cage.
I didn't.
Yes, you did. Hello, Polly! Wakey, wakey! Rise and shine! This is your 9 o'clock alarm call! Well, that's what I call a dead parrot.
No, he's stunned.
Stunned?
Yeah, you stunned him just as he was waking up. Norwegian blue stunned easily.
Oh, my lord, I've had enough of this. That parrot is definitely deceased. And when I bought it not half an hour ago, you assured me that its total lack of movement was due to it being tired and shagged out after a long squawk.
Well, he's pining for the fields.
Pining for the fjords? What kind of talk is that? Look, why did it fall flat on its back the moment I got it home?
Oh, well, the Norwegian blue prefers keeping on its back. Beautiful plumage.
Look, I took the liberty of examining that parrot, and I discovered that the only reason that it had been sitting on its perch in the first place was that it had been nailed there.
Oh, well, of course it was nailed there. I mean, if I hadn't nailed it there, it would have muscled up to those bars and boom!
Look here, mate. This parrot wouldn't boom if you put 4,000 volts through it. It's bleeding demise.
No, it's pining.
It's not pining. It's passed on. This parrot is no more. It has ceased to be. It's expired and gone to see its maker. This is a late parrot. It tastes bereft of life. It rests in peace. If you hadn't nailed it to the perch, it would be pushing up the daisies. It's rung down the curtain and joined the choir invisible. This is an ex-parrot.
Well, I better replace it then.
If you want to get anything done in this country, you've got to complain to your blue in the mud.
Sorry, Squire, I've had a look. We're right out of parrots.
I see. I get the picture.
I've got a slug.
Does it talk?
Not really.
Well, it's scarcely a replacement then, is it?
Listen, I didn't want to work in a pet shop. I wanted to be a lumberjack.
I'm sorry, this is irrelevant, isn't it?
Yes! A lumberjack! Leaping from tree to tree as they float down the mighty rivers of British Columbia.
Okay, so what social role is filled by each of these characters? Who do we have an interaction here between? Yeah, We have a shopkeeper and a customer, right?
What was the second one you said?
Customer.
Oh, customer.
Yeah, shopkeeper and customer. Good. And how do we assume this kind of situation is supposed to work when a customer has a complaint?
The shopkeeper does something about it.
Yeah. You know, how many have heard the mantra before, you know, the customer is always right, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be assumption that this kind of, you know, consumer capitalism tends to be based on, right? Give the customer what they want. Is that what happens here? What do we get instead?
He's trying to justify that.
Yeah, the shopkeeper here is trying to do anything he can to avoid. Yeah, I mean, when the customer first comes in, what does the shopkeeper tell him?
It's asleep.
Yeah, we're closed for lunch. Sorry. And then, when the customer won't let him go, he keeps trying to make he keeps trying to explain why the bird isn't dead, right? And then when it's clear that he's lost the argument and has had to admit the bird is dead and must do something about it, then what does he do? Comes up with another excuse. What does he offer the customer instead?
A slug.
Yeah, something clearly not equivalent to a parrot, right? You know, I'm out of parrots, but I have a slug. And then, when that is not an acceptable solution, what does he do?
He said he doesn't even want to be there.
Yeah, he changes the subject entirely, right? So what we have here is a series of strategies on the part of the shopkeeper to avoid having to do anything to satisfy the customer, right? Now, to what extent do we think the customer's complaint is justified? Okay, yeah, the bird is clearly not moving, right? Is obviously dead, whatever the shopkeeper says about it, right? You know, no, it's not resting. It's not pining for the fjords, right? No, it is dead. And by the way, how can we tell that the shopkeeper, is there anything the shopkeeper says that suggests to us that he doesn't actually know shit about parrots or that he's completely bullshitting this?
He said it's from Norway.
Yeah, he calls the parrot a Norwegian blue. Now, we may not know much about parrots, but we know they don't come from Norway, right? You know, a parrot let loose in Norway is probably going to freeze to death. But what actual assumption, then, does the sketch seem to be based on, right? So our usual cultural assumption is that the customer is always right. How many of you have ever actually worked a customer service job? Okay, yeah, me too, right? I waited tables when I was in grad school, and I did online customer service for WeightWatchers.com for about 1.5 years.
Bowling alley and fast food.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And how often, when you were working customer service, did you actually give the customer what they wanted when they complained? Most of the time?
Mm-hmm.
And did you get in trouble with your boss for it? No? See, when I was doing online customer service, my job was not so much to make the customer happy as it was to make sure that the company didn't lose any money, right? So my job was mostly to send emails explaining to people why they weren't going to get their money back, right? Because, oh, I'm sorry you didn't read this obscure little codicil down here at the bottom of the contract you signed, right? So, sorry, we get to keep your money.
So that's how we were at the bowling alley. There's a no refund policy.
Yeah. So yeah, customer service is usually more about loss prevention than it is about actually making the customer happy. And that seems to be the assumption the sketch is based on, right? That if you actually gave the customer what they wanted, you might put yourself out of business. Now, the other issue here has to do perhaps with the gullibility of the public, right? Now, what do we think the state of this parrot was when the customer bought it?
So he said it was nailed to the...
Yeah, it was already nailed to the perch and not moving, right? So the customer was already foolish enough to buy an obviously dead parrot, right? You know, there's a point in the sketch where he says, I know a dead parrot when I see one. Does he, though?
No.
Obviously not, because he bought one, right? So there does also seem to be an assumption that the customer might have deserved what he got, right? So maybe instead of the customer is always right, the customer gets what they deserve. Because in the end, who wins the argument? Well, the customer wins the argument over whether the parrot is dead or not, right? But does he get anything for it? So who actually wins? Yeah. The shopkeeper wins because he doesn't end up having to do anything, right? Yes, we acknowledge the parrot is dead, but I didn't want to be a pet. I didn't want to work in a pet store anyway. I wanted to be a lumberjack. Bye. So we can also say here, perhaps, that right in a capitalist system, one in which people buy and sell things, right? The market, represented by the shopkeeper, will always beat the consumer. And you know, some of this is just kind of spitballing ideas here, right? But these are the kinds of ideas that I want you to look for underlying the article that I'm going to send to you this afternoon, right? That you're going to use for assignment 3. And I don't want you to try to analyze the whole article, right? I want you to focus, as the instructions tell you there, on a single paragraph of the article, right? Focusing your attention on smaller pieces will typically get you better results, right, than trying to draw large global conclusions about the whole thing, right? So just focus on one paragraph and try to think about the assumptions underlying it, right? So do you guys have any questions for me about the assignment or about any of this material?
You said afterward we're writing 500-word thing about what necessarily?
Pardon?
What's the 500-word writing? Is that going to be about a prompt that it gives us, or is that going to be about what we analyze?
Yeah. So the 500-word piece is going to be about the paragraph you've analyzed, right? And what assumptions you think are underlying it and how you got there, right? And I do also just I want to see you kind of like making a little chart of your observations and things like that. That's something I'm going to want. What's that? Yeah. You're going to be taking it a little bit further than the last assignment, but yeah, you're doing the same basic thing. In fact, that same basic method of kind of like looking for strands and binaries and anomalies is pretty much what we're going to be doing with everything, right?